some movies, only some great movies have translated into great games. And I wanted to just touch on that point, even though it's not really my specialty. And one of the reasons you may be wondering why, and when you look at those videos, a lot of them look great, so I don't think it's the visual quality that's really missing in most cases. But one of the things that's happened with these licensed titles is, and we've touched on this before with all the licensing and who owns the rights and all these things, and once everyone finally agrees that they want to take a movie to video games, and all the paperwork gets signed and stuff, the video game makers are told, all right, get this done for the opening weekend. So they're saying, you know, basically often you have 8 months or 9 months, or actually in the example of the world's, what's often quoted as the world's worst video game, which is E.T. I think the guy had 5 weeks to make E.T. the game a game. And making a video game is actually, as I'll talk about with Assassin's Creed, it takes a long time. So it may seem like these projects are doomed from the start and we don't have that many good examples of great movies that have become great games, but the reason that they haven't is really the time constraints. It's the fact that people have not had the time to dedicate into like thinking, how do we transform this property into being something great? And actually, we ended on a Godfather still there. And it's interesting because for the Godfather game, that's something that Coppola was very much opposed to, and he didn't want to participate in the creation of that game at all. Partially, he was worried about the time allotted to it, but also the other thing that we have to pay attention to when converting movie properties to video games is that there is this interactivity. That's the main thing that's different. There is gameplay, and that gameplay has a message associated with it. If your gameplay is running around and being a gangster and shooting people, that does transmit a message and a meaning, and that may not be in line with the movie's meaning. So those kinds of things have to be considered. Okay, so another type of, this is the ugly, another type of first generation collaborations, which is games that became movies. Now, how many of you guys have seen any of these? Can clap a bit if you've seen any, or go boo if that's how you really feel about it. So here's an example of a whole bunch of things like that got translated into movies. And for example, Super Mario or the Mario Brothers. How many people have heard of Mario? Can you lift up your hands? Yeah, so everyone, right? And so studio execs thought, oh, wow, you know, Mario, it's sold like 40 million or 80 million, I don't know what it's up to now, copies worldwide. We can make a movie that'll be like making so much money. But I think, my opinion, and again, this is not my expertise, but all I did was spend a bit of time thinking about it, but my opinion is that the reason that we have these games and these awful movies that result from great games is that they're chosen for the wrong reasons. When in the past, if you look at these movies, the reason that people decided or studios decided that it was a good idea to turn these games into movies is the number of people who have played them. It wasn't because the story was compelling or because, you know, the universe was really great and broad, or that the characters really were deep and interesting and lent themselves to make a great movie. They just said, okay, popular franchise, let's just port it over. And I think that's the wrong approach. And you know what movies have been doing great forever is people, you know, option books. You guys all know this. This is your specialty. And you think, this story is really compelling. I want to bring it to film. But it's not the same kind of thing. It wasn't that same kind of, okay, this game has this really compelling story and great universe. It's really just, okay, what are the marketing numbers? And let's do that. So that was the first generation. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the second generation, which is sort of what's going on now. What we're seeing now is like cross-pollination between films and games. And what we're seeing is a lot of like these technologies that were developed in games or with games are being used by people who are making film. And what you see here is a screen of a guy running there. A lot of ILM is really pioneering a lot of this, is taking their movie studio tools and their game studio tools and blending them together and making one tool set that artists can work in back and forth. And this is being used for pre-visualization, obviously to get like big crowds and AI. They're using a lot of the same methods that we use, AI as artificial intelligence, using a lot of the same methods that we use in video games to get the artificial intelligence of the crowds working there. You see a lot the rendering of high definition faces and models to then use use that to get the facial expressions. And movies like 300 are being completely filmed on blue screens and then go through a post-process that is a lot like video games. So that's kind of where we've been recently. And then on the game side, this is where I'm going to talk about Assassin's Creed. We've started adopting, well, integrating kind of the best talent. Instead of going to get ideas from films, we've been trying to get the knowledge and the people who know how to tell stories and bring those people and integrate them into game development. So actually, Assassin's Creed was in development for 4 years. Gone are the days where you can make a great game with one programmer sitting in his garage and one artist. This takes 4 years and more than 300 people on site at the Montreal studio all working on this project. Plus about 350 off-site because we did casting around the world in Los Angeles, in Europe, in Montreal for all of the accented voices. We also recruited, this is my main point, is we had to recruit specialists from the film industry. We started with a writer, and this writer who normally works in film was part of the core team working on Assassin's Creed from the start. And that doesn't mean that, you know, he wasn't off in LA getting, you know, kind of, here we want you to write dialogue for here, these spots in the game, and this is how it goes. He was part of the creative team from the start, brainstorming, making sure that he understood how the game mechanics worked and how that reinforced the meaning of his story, and giving his ideas for the story to the designers. So it was this collaborative process, real collaborative process, and we took quite a different perspective than what's done traditionally in games with that. So the writer I mentioned, we also recruited the historian who worked with Ridley Scott on Kingdom of Heaven. He's a specialty on the Third Crusade. That's the setting of our game. And we made sure that he was part of the conception process. And we also had DP, director of photography, special effects, stunt people for motion capture, casting agents, storyboard artists, you name it, and we had those people who traditionally work in film working on Assassin's Creed. And why did we go through this trouble of doing this? It's one fundamental belief that I have about video games is that, and this is not news to you guys, but that in order to make video games really reach their potential, we have to start telling relevant stories. We have to have video games with stories that have a meaning and be conscious of that meaning, not just have guys jumping around or, you know, the actions disassociated from the story. And maybe this seems like everyone should consider this, but it's a relatively new approach. And for that, we had to go get people from the film background to help teach us how to bring that out in our interactive entertainment. So, another thing is go big like the best epic films. So this is another thing that you're seeing in video games. Now that it's big business, it's kind of like go big or go home. And we really wanted to deliver not only a meaningful story, but a real epic experience that's on par with the movies. So we built from scratch, modeled on the actual historical documents that we got from working with the historian, 3 important historical cities, all of the countryside in between, so you can actually visit northern Syria in our game, and it's all modeled out based on the actual you know, types of trees and stuff like that that you would find. There's over 10,000 different animations just for the main character, and barks are just the kind of voice reactions of the crowd. Over 6,500 reactions that you can interact with the crowd and get these random reactions to what you're doing. And these are the kinds of things that maybe you don't think about that much in film because it's one story, but you have to create all of these extra reactions because in a video game, the player now is riding around on horse, doing whatever they want, exploring things and interacting with the crowd however they want. And you have to, what's fun for a player is getting a reaction, an unexpected reaction from that. Over 20 hours of gameplay, and 40 important characters and thousands of unique characters. Whoops. So you can see that really creating a game now with a game that takes 4 years, that takes all of these specialists, that takes this many just characters that to live and breathe inside of the world is really quite a huge undertaking, and we're recruiting people with all different backgrounds.